the first pleasure of inviting Dr. Renu Swarup, who is currently the Secretary of Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, and she is also Managing Director of Biotechnology Industry Research Assistant Council, BIRAC. She is also the head of National Bioresource Development Board. She is in the Scientific Advisory Committee of the Prime Minister. She had yeoman contribution to bioscience and biotechnology education and research policy and this cause of women in science. She is indeed a multifaceted personality with such a long years of association with the biotechnology or bioscience group. So may I now request Dr. Renu Swarup, Madam, to speak on vaccine manufacturing and distribution policies and plans to save the life of the people from the pandemic through rapid vaccination. Dr. Renu Swarup, please.
Thank you very much, and very good morning to all of you. And thank you so much for having me here, Professor Edina. I think your whole conceptualization of this particular conference and your invitation, I'm very pleased to be here with you today. I think you all have identified a very important topic for discussion, and it's important that you have all the stakeholders here who are collecting together to discuss an important issue, which is not just any longer limited just to the science or to the clinical aspects, but it's become a citizens issue because everyone would like to know, when are we getting the vaccine? Who is going to get the vaccine? How will we get the vaccine? So these are issues which are definitely the topic of discussion today. And I think, as I've been saying on other fora and also in discussions with my own colleagues, never earlier in the history have we ever seen such a spotlight on science, technology, the whole area of vaccine development as we are seeing now. I mean, you literally have a day-to-day trial of the vaccine being monitored by the citizens, by the media, by the public. While it's very good, it is bringing in a level of understanding and information to everybody who's involved and engaged with it, and also those who are now going to be, part of, because it's obviously a vaccine that we're bringing out for the public. It also puts a lot of responsibility and accountability on the scientific, the technological, the clinical community. And I think for India, which has been recognized as a vaccine manufacturing hub, it's been recognized for its strengths in vaccine development for so many years. This is today our responsibility, as the Honorable Prime Minister has said on many fora, not just to have vaccines ready for our own country, but have vaccines ready for the globe. It's a global cause that we are all working for. And I think that's really what the effort has been over these last many months since this pandemic came into our lives. I think, first of all, it's very important to understand where are we in India positioned with our vaccine development. And as I said, India has this unique strength, which has been globally recognized for many years today, of being a vaccine manufacturing hub. More than 60% of the world's vaccines which go into immunization are manufactured within this country. We do have, in fact, a large number of vaccines which have been developed indigenously within the country, of course, with national and international collaborations, which today are in the immunization program. Our very recent rotavirus vaccine, which this department has been working with many other agencies, which is today in the immunization program, is again a recognition of the strength that we have. With this, when the pandemic came, it was definitely felt that yes, India will be able to take this challenge on. And I think I'm very pleased to say today so many months down the line that India has taken on this challenge. India is leading from the front, and India has put together all components that are required to go right from the research and development through the whole ecosystem that needs to be built to facilitate and accelerate vaccine development, to facilitate the manufacturing of the vaccines, and most importantly, the delivery of the vaccines. Again, in each one of them, as I said, we do have a lot of experience, we do have a lot of strength, we have strong foundations, and it was on these foundations that the government has very quickly built on newer policies, which we can then help to move ahead. I'm not going to go through where we currently are in the global status of the vaccine development, because today, as I said, this is the media news. You open up any news channel and they'll all give you a complete comparison of which vaccine, which global vaccine, which trial has it gone into, what is the efficacy data, what is the safety data. So we all know that. But I think what is important for us is to understand that never earlier has there been a situation where we are looking at a particular target, but we're looking at many platforms and we're looking at multiple vaccines which are going to be rolled out more or less together or straight one after the other, because the pipeline is so strong. We are very, very pleased that if today we talk about global phase 3 trials, if you're talking about 11, and that's my data for 2 days back, believe me, you really have to have a dynamic real-time dashboard now, because that's really how quickly numbers are changing on that dashboard. But out of those 11, we were very pleased that we had 2 Indian companies who were doing the phase 3 trials. India has partnered for the Russian trial, which has also now started on the Indian territory. So 3 which have gone into phase 3 trials. I think that's a huge number for a country to be able to be proud of, to take forward. It's then important to understand that how has this happened so very quickly. All of you are from the field, so you all know that vaccine development, a complex journey. 10 to 14 years is what we would always generally say. If you get onto a journey of vaccine development, it would take you 10 to 14 years before you do that. And here you're talking about less than 10 to 14 months. How did we do that? So while a layperson may ask, how did it change? This August gathering here knows exactly that each of the process of the discovery to the development, to the validation, to the clinical trials, all steps have been followed. Each part of the regulatory framework has been done, but then what is it that we did differently to be able to compress this timelines to 10 to 14 months? I think it's very important to understand that there are key components which help us to do this. And in this particular case, I would say, first of all, I think it was the commitment, because we all realized that this was a global challenge, and anybody who gets into taking this forward, whoever has the capacities and the competence to do that, were committed to do it. Since it was a collective ownership of the final goal that we were to achieve, it quickly brought us into the next very important step, and that is collaboration. Never before have we seen all stakeholders come together without an effort, come and collaborate to be able to deliver for a common goal. And this collaboration extended beyond the boundaries of countries, beyond the boundaries of public and private sector. We got everyone together. All the various departments and ministries within the government are today collectively on the vaccine group, which is trying to look at where are the issues, how would we do this, which are the bottlenecks which are going to come in our way, and not only approach it when it comes, but proactively try and recognize what is it that we are going to face? How do we address it in advance so that we are well prepared for it when it comes forward? Today, when you see vaccines which have been developed, and you'll see, in fact, all the players who are in this today, whether it's Serum or it's Bharat Biotech or it's Zydus Cadila, all of them, BioE, Dr. Reddy's, Genova, all of them who are in the advanced stages. I'm sure they're all part of your August gathering here. It's just that in this virtual circumstances, you can't see them. You just have to recognize names on the grid to be able to understand who's there. I'm sure they would all tell you that today, when they are in their vaccine development stage, what we see is the endpoint that the vaccine has come out, or the vaccine is at this stage of development. How many various groups are they collaborating with? The academic research centers, the groups nationally and internationally who are giving access to the resources that are required. I think that was the second most important component, which then brought in the accelerated the development of the vaccine. And for both these that I have put in, whether it's the commitment or whether it's the collaboration, believe me, there was no new policy that the government had to put in place. These were policies which came in from organizations which were part of it. It was just to be taken forward. The third most important aspect is how do all the stakeholders partner? How does the government partner with the industry? How does the government partner with international groups to again give this commitment of saying we are developing vaccines not just for the country, but for the world? So we, in fact, over these last couple of months, India has been an active partner in all the international fora which have been created, whether it's the ACT Accelerator, whether it's the COVAX, all our discussions. Now here again, while specific policy decisions were taken by the government to become partners in this, this was greatly enhanced and accelerated by our existing collaborations and partnerships that we already had. And here India was already a partner with CEPI, India was already a partner with the Gates Foundation, with Gavi, with WHO, of course, our NIH partnership, all these, the Wellcome Trust partnerships, all these were very strong partnerships which helped us to bring in our presence. So again, no new policy decisions, but yes, building on policies which the government had created and taken over the last few years to be able to build this very strong collaboration to be able to move forward. Now, having said this, while we've got our entire act in place, we've sort of got a large number of candidates that we have been able to bring forward. We've been able to get these industry academia partnerships strongly supported. We've got all agencies within the government who've come together, as I said, in this vaccine group to be able to collectively take decisions as to how quickly. And this is all actually it's all a senior leadership which is itself engaged in this entire vaccine development program. And that gives us a lot of confidence to be able to move it forward. But having said this, it's now important to say what is it that we are doing to further accelerate this development. So again, I would like to allude to certain decisions which were taken a few years back, which helped us to build on that to be able to move forward today. As you all know, the government set up the National Biopharma Mission, which is being implemented by BIRAC, which is our public sector. BIRAC, of course, is about 8 years in existence, but the Biopharma Mission is just a little less than 3 years into existence, where we connected with all organizations, the DBT, of course, the ICMR, the CSIR, the industry, very many institutes which were engaged in this sort of an activity of creating a biopharma ecosystem for translational research. So our whole effort was, how do we take discovery research to translational research? identify what are the gaps. And those gaps need to be then plugged by bringing in various enablers, whether they are policy enablers, whether there is investment that is required to create shared infrastructure, or whether there are policies that require to bring together the regulatory ecosystem and also connect it with other organizations. So the biopharma mission, and of course, most importantly, building capacities of human resource. Because today, if you need to expand, if you need to accelerate, and each of the industry who's engaged in this will say that you need trained, skilled human resource at every stage, whether it's the research and development stage, whether it's the validation stage, whether it's the clinical trials, either the preclinical or the phase 1, 2, 3, you need capacities. You need people to understand how to do that without compromising on the quality and the standards through which it is done. And I think that was the major focus that we had put on the biopharma mission. And that again came to our advantage now to be able to quickly ramp up what was already there. The collaborations of DBT and ICMR in terms of setting up clinical trial research networks, I think again is something which has really facilitated the speedy implementation of this whole vaccine development cycle. We have, in fact, while we spoke about these 5 or 6 vaccines which are now into advanced stages of trial, they are into human trials between phase 1 to phase 3 level. We are hoping to get data very soon from some of them so that they would be ready for, and already the stockpiling and manufacturing is happening so that we are ready for a rollout very soon. I think it was, again, there were 2 aspects that we focused on, and that is, one is partnering with them for investment purpose. So how do we facilitate and become part of the investment needs which are there for this development? And most importantly, as I said, how do we create a robust ecosystem? So we focused on supporting a large number of candidates, both financially, but more important technically as well. Financial supports to the industry are probably, right now the industry itself has come forward, so it's not really a financial support of the government that they're looking for, but I think it was the technical support and also the support that it's being backed up by the government to facilitate at each step in which it moves forward, because it's all being done for a national and a global cause. But yes, the public sector institutes are academic research institutes. Many of them have also identified a large number of candidates which are in different stages. And it's important for us to continue to support each one of them, because as this moves on, we really do not know which vaccine is going to be the correct vaccine, which is going to have a better efficacy and safety data. But it's important to have this large pipeline, because it's also very interesting to see that we have different platforms which are today being worked upon. As again said, never before have we seen this sort of a situation where you have multiple vaccines and multiple platforms. So what we did is, while we have nearly 30 candidates which are in different stages, some very early stages, some in preclinical, some reaching preclinical, which we hope will also be rolling out very soon. We also then realized that it was important to have within the country our own very strong ecosystem for the animal facilities, so that you have the animal challenge models available, and also the immunoassay labs. Because as you have very many candidates or very many trials which will get started, you will need access to these. Plus, of course, the clinical trial sites. So while we have a large number of clinical trial sites, I think between the ICMR and other hospitals had nearly about 60 different sites across the country. Through the biopharma mission, we supported another about, I think, 11 phase 3 sites, nearly about 30 hospital sites. So collectively, we do have nearly 60 to 65 sites across the country which have been engaged, not just today. I mean, they've been engaged for years in doing clinical trials, and they have a lot of competence. But it was important to bring in more competence into these, and that's really when we've now put in a lot of investment again, not just financial investment, but investment in terms of building their capacities, bringing in our partnerships with WHO, bringing in our partnership with CEPI, bringing in the right resource people to see that these sites become sites which are globally acceptable, so that when you have larger trials, when you have other vaccines coming in, these are trials which are accepted globally, because we do recognize that the vaccines which get developed within the country would go into WHO pre-qualification for being available globally. And that's really what our effort is, that we make this based on this. These sites should be, and these labs should be ready to be accepted by global standards. We are very pleased that one of our laboratories, the THSTI, has been recognized by the CEPI network of immunoassay labs. So that again gives us a lot of recognition. So that's one of the laboratories, but we are hoping that, in fact, our laboratory network of 6 laboratories would now facilitate it, and we'll expand it to about 10 or 12. You did hear, I'm sure many of you heard the finance minister's recent stimulus for which has been announced for Atmanirbhar Bharat, and the COVID Suraksha mission, which has been given the go-ahead, the green signal, which is really for the vaccine development. So it's for the R&D, which goes right up to supporting vaccine development up to the manufacturing stage. And here again, as I said, it's going to be investment not just for the trials, for building a strong ecosystem. While we are investing in this, what is it that we are trying to see? It's not just the COVID vaccine today. There would be many other vaccines that India would roll out. So we are creating a very strong foundation of an Atmanirbhar Bharat, that India, which has always been looked at as a site for vaccine manufacturing and developing, is also now looked at as a site globally for other vaccines to come into the country. And that's really the effort that we've put in. How do we move forward? What is it that India is going to do to help and facilitate the development of this vaccine as we move ahead? One is, we've also started interacting with some of the international organizations, of course, but also some of the countries to facilitate and help them to build their capacities. We have launched an India Pact program, which is a partnership for accelerating clinical trials, where we are working with our neighboring countries, with our friendly countries, to build their capacities in training, and also to facilitate if clinical trials have to be held. So that's our next step, with that we are working towards facilitating the trials and also facilitating capacities in the region for being able to help vaccine development even beyond COVID vaccine. The last point that I would like to mention is, because you did speak about the delivery ecosystem. The delivery ecosystem that you've spoken about, I think, while I'm sure during this conference you will have others who will come in from the health ministry to give you more information about it, it's important for me to say that the delivery ecosystem required a lot of planning, but again, our strength in the immunization program of our country, which we have been able to do a lot of immunization program, gave us that strength to say, how do we vaccinate a country as large as ours? I think the health ministry and all the players are already on it. A very good vaccine rollout delivery plan has already been put into place. We have an IT-based platform, which they will slowly roll out with the information. All the state governments have been brought on board. But I would just like to say that, which I started with, that the government is now working proactively to ensure that all the steps that we need to take, whether it's from the regulatory viewpoint, whether it's from the procurement viewpoint, whether it's from the delivery viewpoint, those are done well in advance, that we are ready to roll out. A country, and I'm sure many of you heard Dr. Vinod Paul, who chairs this group, which all of us are part of the delivery ecosystem, he has said, and that's our Honorable Prime Minister's message, if we can do elections with a large country like ours, the same model is what's going to be used for the vaccination as well. And I think that's the strength that we're going to follow to take forward. So with this, I will conclude by just saying and reiterating to everybody here that the government is fully committed to ensure that we have a safe and efficacious vaccine for all our citizens, which is made available on time as soon as it's ready for delivery, The policies and enablers which can facilitate it are already in place. And the most important point is, with the Atmanirbhar Bharat call that has been put out, this ecosystem is not going to be limited only to COVID. It's going to be beyond COVID. And if we can all come together to respond to COVID, I'm sure we don't need another pandemic to continue this collaboration, to continue this commitment. We can continue to do that for everything else that we do. So with this, thank you very much for having me here. Thank you, Dr. Edna, and thank you, the entire team. I wish you good luck for your future discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, Dr. Renu Swarup, madam, for your excellent deliberation and explaining us the government policies, what you are doing in vaccine development as well as the vaccination, and in this process, you have really set the tone for the deliberation for rest of the sessions. We are really very, very thankful to you. And the fact that in spite of your busy schedule, you have been able to spend so much of time for us. This shows your commitment to the cause. Thank you very much, madam. May I now invite Dr. Srinath Reddy. Dr. Srinath Reddy is the actually President of Public Health Foundation of India. He heads the Department of Cardiology, New Delhi sometime back. He is an adjunct professor in epidemiology in Harvard School of Public Health. He is a prolific researcher, an orator, an author too. He has been instrumental in developing health-related policies for the Government of India and the states. Currently, he is actually advisor to the Health Department, advisor of health to the Government of Odisha, holding a cabinet rank. Today, Dr. Reddy is going to speak on the vaccine supply chain, which will be shaped by choice and capacity. This is a very important topic that he has selected. May I now request Dr. Reddy, please keep your deliberation.
Thank you very much, sir, for this opportunity. Well, this particular conference has the stellar participation of many people who are actively engaged in vaccine development, production, and distribution, and in policy making at various levels. So my role as a public health advocate is going to be to raise some questions rather than provide all the answers. As the vice person once said, it is the questions that are important, the answers are all out there. I think given the expertise that is there in this conference, the answers will flow. But let me mention as to why we have to really look at choices and capacity. Are our choices going to be constrained by our capacity, or will we make choices on other grounds? Vaccine that needs to be chosen, which vaccine? The population to be vaccinated, how many? Is it going to be 80% of the population? Is it going to be 100% of the population? Or, as recently the director of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences said, we may not need to vaccinate so many because many people would have already acquired herd immunity by then, which I do not believe. But nevertheless, that's an argument that has been put forth. So next comes the question, who first and who next? Because the supply chain is not going to be in full flow immediately. And how do we actually prioritize and on what basis? Who will be distributing and who will be controlling the distribution policy between the center and the states? How many supply chains? Who will pay? Will it be universally free for everybody? Or will it be through a direct to beneficiary transfer for the poor and the vulnerable through the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana or through other government facilities? Is it going to be employer provided for those in the organized sector? Is it going to be personally purchased on priority by people who can afford it from private outlets? These are again some questions that will come up in terms of the choices that the government will have to really decide upon in terms of policy. Will there be a three-tier? We are likely to plump for an intramuscular vaccine. Are the personnel involved in the actual administration of the vaccine adequate in number and skills? Are they adequately distributed across the country? If the responsibility is going to be left entirely to the state governments, or will there also be a central team that will be moving from place to place to supplement the capacity that is there in weaker states? Those are some of the questions, again, that will have to be answered. And who will be monitoring all of this process? Now, coming to the question of which vaccine, obviously, we have to really look at multiple considerations, whether it is going to be a vaccine that is going to be produced in India after having been developed in India, or produced in India after having been developed elsewhere but licensed for manufacture here, or entirely procured from a foreign developed and produced vaccine. All of this, again, will have some impact on the supply chain in terms of the volume of supply that is available, apart from, of course, the production volume per day, even for the domestically manufactured vaccine. So what will be the flow as we move along and we ramp up our capacity? Will the flow actually keep in measure with the amount required as per our decisions? Or will we be constrained by some of the supply chain constraints? Of course, in terms of the mRNA vaccines, it does appear that those that require minus 70 degrees centigrade for preservation and transport, storage and transport, are ruled out automatically. The minus 20, according to the Government of India authorities, is feasible according to our supply chain conditions, but nevertheless, cost may be a bit of a prohibitive factor. So are we going to be going in for other vaccines? Of course, in the hope that our domestically developed and domestically manufactured vaccines would be available soon to make it our first and perhaps our only choice? Or will we have a menu of vaccines to choose from and choose a combination thereof, principally depending upon our domestic vaccines, but supplementing it also from internationally procured vaccines if they're relatively inexpensive and easily available, either through the WHO procurement process or through a direct negotiated purchase. So these are going to be some of the important questions. But then the other big question is going to be, is it going to be a single dose vaccine or is it going to be a double dose vaccine? How many doses do we have to really then actually produce in order and distribute for that particular purpose? Perhaps at some point in time when we have multiple vaccines available, we may actually create a vaccine scoring system based on the cost, efficacy, safety, duration of protection, ease of administration, and so on. But that doesn't appear to be immediately in the offing. It may take up to 2022 for multiplicity of vaccines to be available for that kind of a scoring process to be developed. Then comes the question of population. Which is the population that we choose to vaccinate, particularly when the supply chain is going to be relatively narrow in the beginning? How do we actually move along in terms of choosing? There is an essentiality model and a demography and disease model, a vulnerability model. Essentiality model really talks about people who are actually essential for maintaining our services in health, other essential services, and security. So we choose the health workers first, and then, of course, other essential workers who are also supporting the health services, but then also the security and transport services. All of them fit in with the essentiality model. In terms of demography, we look at age as the vulnerability area. We also look at crowd density, particularly in urban areas of large cities, and then look at whether that is going to be the determining factor. People with comorbidities and confer vulnerability, or where it is now spreading faster. If the cities are getting controlled and the small towns and villages are the hot zones of rapid spread, do we intervene there first in order to contain? So those are going to be some of the important questions and choices that the government will have to make, both the central and the state government. I believe there is now an emphasis on a mixed model where essentiality of health workers and other essential health services will be prioritized first, followed, of course, immediately by those who are likely to be at higher risk because of higher age, being the elderly, or with the diagnosed comorbidities. The problem about comorbidities is that in smaller towns and villages where the health services have not been very strong in the past and screening programs have not been very effective, many people with comorbidities may not be even aware that they have diabetes or hypertension or coronary artery disease. So we do have to look at people with diagnosed comorbidities, but also apply the age factor as a probability factor for saying that these are the people who are more likely to have comorbidities and include them as well. Then the question comes up is, do we also include people who have been previously infected? If they've already been infected, do they require a vaccine? We do not know the duration of protection and the nature of protection conferred by a previous infection. For example, people who are seriously hospitalized with a high viral load may have a stronger and a longer lasting immune response. Those who have been minimally affected or even asymptomatically diagnosed during a serosurveillance study of antibodies may not have had much of a viral load, and it may not last long. Since we are not studying the T cell immunity in all of these people, we do not know whether they have a lasting immunity or not. So I believe people who have had previous infections and we do not know the duration of immunity or the strength of the immunity, if they would also be candidates for immunization. So that will also mean that a very large proportion of our population would need to be immunized, even if there has been some level of exposure in the population. Then comes the question of distribution. Is the distribution going to be decentralized, and is it going to be dictated mostly by the center in terms of allocation to the states? The states have been told that they cannot procure directly, but it will be centrally determined. What will be the nature of flow from the various production points, whether it is Hyderabad or Pune or elsewhere? How are the distribution flows going? We should look for as much of a decentralized distribution process as possible, even if the policy and monitoring is done at the central level. Then comes the question of a digitized citizen journey for enrollment and then administration and monitoring. Previously, it used to be the paper-based methods in the previous immunization programs. Now we have to move towards a digitized citizen journey. Unfortunately, the advent of the COVID program, which has been a platform that has been devised by the central government, is likely to be helpful in this area, but we need to plan it carefully. But we also have to make sure that technology should not disbar people from getting the vaccine if they are not technologically enabled to access that particular platform. So equity comes in, and we'll have to balance these in terms of efficiency and equity. Then comes the question of transport and cold chain. Clearly, minus 70 degrees is really out of reach, except for some specialized laboratories, and therefore it's not feasible for mass administration. Minus 20 is feasible, but may not necessarily be the best option. So we have to look for vaccines which are not so super freezer cold chain dependent, and those are some of the constraints that we have to really address with and live with the task of administering as fast as possible, as widely as possible, without being constrained by the cold chain barriers. Then comes the question of state organization and central teams, recognizing that who is going to administer the vaccine. Now, clearly, the people who have, it's very different from polio immunization, which was oral, or even measles, which are restricted to only children of a particular age group. So now you are going to be dealing with a huge volume. So how are we going to actually mobilize our available doctors, nurses, possibly medical students and nursing students, and our frontline health workers who are differentially enabled according to state regulations to give or not to give injections? So we have to try and overcome all the regulatory barriers to make sure that our frontline health workers are trained into vaccinators without any regulatory restrictions, but give injections without, with adequate skill and safety. And if we have to train other vaccinators as well, only for the purpose of vaccination, It should not be a very difficult task. It can be monitored training for safety purposes. We may have to recruit others as well into this task. But how do we actually build that kind of a task force in primary healthcare settings who can actually administer these vaccines with ease if an intramuscular injection is to be given, particularly 2 doses, and also monitor for the adverse effects in between. So all of these are going, and where for states we are very weak in terms of human resources in health, will there also be centrally monitored, centrally organized teams who will be also traveling across the country providing these vaccines. So all of these are going to be important decisions to be taken as to how best we can actually ensure universal access to vaccination. Then, of course, comes the big question of how do we incentivize and regulate the vaccine production and the supply chain, because there are going to be many issues related to how public-private partnerships need to be built in, how actually incentives need to be provided to the multiple players, whether it's the cold chain, the developers and the managers of the cold chain, or whether it is going to be the others who are involved actually in the distribution of the vaccine, or in the manufacture of the vaccine for that matter. All of those issues come in, but what are the appropriate regulatory restraints also that we need to apply alongside so that we do not see misuse or ill use of the vaccine? So those are some of the things that we need to really look at. There we have to really look at incentives as well as regulation. Regulation as a part of the same instrument. The carrots as well as the sticks will have to be combined into what I call a frozen carrot, which can act both as a carrot and as a stick. So I believe that the people who are assembled here will adequately and efficiently discharge that public purpose. And thank you very much for this invitation to participate.
Thank you very much, Padma Bhushan Professor Srinath Reddy ji, for your excellent deliberation, and you have really set all the issues that has to be really tackled if this vaccination has to be really made very effective and given to the people who requires it. So it is indeed a sort of eye-opener, and you so nicely explained the issues. Thank you very much again for your sparing so much of time. In spite of all your busy schedule, we're really thankful to your deliberation. Thank you very much. Namaste.